Governor DeSantis, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you, Mark?
Well, you are doing great. I'm doing fine, thank you. I mean, you're a governor, and yet you're active, actually point a spear in trying to get Americans back, working with different companies, different commercial outlets, even military outlets and individuals. And now I see that you are you're launching 2 massive cargo planes with supplies that you've gathered up to go to Israel. Can you explain what you're doing? Because no other governor in the country is doing this.
Well, Mark, when the attacks happened, I mean, obviously it was a very jarring thing, the barbarity of it. But in Florida, we have strong connections with Israel. We've got a lot of our residents who travel back and forth, have friends and family there. So we knew that this was going to be have an impact on our state in a big way. And after a couple days, the people, the Floridians who were in Israel, the State Department, the embassy, they weren't doing anything to help them get out of the war zone. And so last week I did an executive order. We scrambled our emergency response assets, and we said, you know what, we're going to have planes, and we're going to bring people back from Israel back to Florida. And so we did a plane this weekend. It landed on Sunday night, 271, not all Floridians mostly, but, you know, there were other people that were stranded, and we want to help. We're all Americans, so we helped them. 91 of them were children, and a lot of these children are elementary school age. And so I had one mother come to me say, you know, Governor, for the last couple of days, you know, my daughter was telling, 6-year-old daughter was saying, I don't want any more rockets. I don't want to hear the rockets. I want to see Florida again. We got to get back to Florida. So we were able to make that happen. Here's the thing. The Biden administration, what they finally decided to do was they could dump people in Cyprus or dump you in Athens, Greece, but then they were going to charge you for that. And I'm just thinking to myself, well, first of all, how are they going to get from Greece back home? Like, a lot of people have never even been there. Second of all, you're an illegal alien. You come across the border. This government will fly you at taxpayer expense, no cost to the illegal alien, all across this country. They will put you in hotels, no cost to the illegal alien, on the taxpayer, and they won't even think twice about it. But yet Americans, U.S. citizens trying to leave a conflict, they're going to charge you and not even bring you all the way home. So it just shows you how this government operates. They put the American people last. They don't give a damn about our own citizens. They care about their own twisted agenda. So we have a couple more planes that are going to be coming. One's going to come tomorrow with, I think, about 280, and then we're going to have another one. So we're going to have ended up bringing back between 700 and 1,000 U.S. citizens, mostly Floridians, from Israel to Florida. And when the planes go back, that's how we have the cargo. We've got a lot of people that have donated things. We've got stuff to move over there. So if the planes are going over there anyways, we want to be helpful. So we've worked with the Israeli government to be able to get them a lot of stuff. And part of that is some of the generosity of our citizens here. But, you know, Mark, when there's no leadership, you have a choice. Are you just going to sit there and complain about it? Or are you going to step up, and are you going to lead? So we choose to step up. We make things happen, particularly in times of crisis. That's just what you have to do. And I'll tell you, the folks that my wife and I greeted on Sunday night, you know, they were very happy that somebody actually stood up for them.
You know, you fill the void in so many ways. I remember with the COVID-19, you took a position different than the government and so forth. But I want to ask you something. The missile embargo on Iran expires tomorrow. Nobody's talking about this. You have recently as well, but Biden's not talking about it. Blinken's not talking about it. Nobody you're running against is talking about it. The cap comes off tomorrow, which means they are free to build ICBMs. They're free to build whatever they want. They're free to sell them. They're free to give them to the Russians, to the communist Chinese. They're free to go all out for nukes. And nothing's being done about this. What's that?
Well, but I think this is intentional by Biden, Mark. I mean, what did he do when he came in? I mean, he relaxed sanctions on Iran. So they had, and we talk about this $6 billion deal recently, and I was one of the first out of the gate in August to condemn it because it was outrageous. but there's tens of billions that have flown into Iran's coffers as a result of what Biden's done from day one of his presidency. And, of course, that was money that was then turned around and sent to Hamas and Hezbollah. And this attack may not have happened by Hamas had Biden not, loosened the screws on the Iranians. And so even now, I think what he's trying to do by going over to Israel, I think he's trying to undercut their ability to completely decimate Hamas, because I think Biden wants to have a rapprochement with Iran, even to this day. He hasn't taken any action to tighten the financial screws on the Iranians. I mean, why do we want them making a fortune on oil? So I think this is all part of a really twisted plan. I think that they have an ideological attachment to trying to have a rapprochement with Iran. And look, these Iranian mullahs, they have a religious ideology. When they get the money, they're not going to help their people. They're going to foment jihad around the Middle East. That is what they live for. And that's not going to change just because Biden's nice to them. So it's a total fool's errand, but I think he's intent on undermining Netanyahu, and I think he's going to try to continue to have a rapprochement with Iran. It should be after this attack that any of that with Iran, even from a Democrat administration, should stop, and we should do whatever we can to put Iran in a box, both in terms of denying their ability to expand militarily and denying their ability to enrich themselves, whether it's through oil or other means. In Florida, we announced expanded Iran sanctions a few days after the attack, where our view is there's a broader parts of the Iranian economy, not just with energy, that we want to hit. And look, Florida, we're the 13th largest economy in the world if we were our own country. So we pack a punch, and so we're going to do those sanctions there, because our view is money going into Iran, profits going into Iran, the regime is going to use that for funding terrorism. So we don't want to be a part of that in Florida.
Governor DeSantis, Qatar gives a safe haven to the top leadership of Hamas, which has now killed 30 Americans and has God knows how many kidnapped Americans. Turkey gives safe haven to the leadership of Hamas that Qatar doesn't take. Qatar has spent over the decades billions of dollars building up Hamas. And then Biden goes to Qatar to negotiate for the freedom of our kidnapped Americans. Qatar has enormous investments in this country. How come there's no pressure placed on Qatar or Turkey for what they're involved in here?
Well, Blinken was over there. I don't think he said anything about the Hamas leadership. He didn't pressure them at all. I mean, they have the leaders there. They've been funding Hamas for quite some time, and that's something that I think most people have acknowledged for many, many years. And then Turkey, I mean, this is a supposed NATO ally? I mean, are you kidding me? So, yeah, look, I think that they have all these different things that they could be doing. And I think what the administration is going to start doing even more aggressively is they're going to basically be blaming Israel and say that there's civilian casualties, that this is all Israel's fault. I mean, you saw the corporate press lie today about this hospital. They blamed Israel for this hospital being bombed. It turned out it was a rocket launched, and it misfired, but it was a misfired rocket from Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And yet this is front page, top of the fold news on all these news websites that somehow Israel did it. And I think they've now corrected it, but it's like Hamas says Israel does it, and you just take that and run with it. So there's a lot of propaganda that's being built up, marshaled against Israel. I think the Biden administration, because of their left-wing base, I think they want Israel to do very little. I don't think that they want them to go into Gaza and completely decimate Hamas, because I think that makes it harder for them to deal with Iran the way they want to, and I think it will lead to more domestic pressure on them, because the far left in this country, I mean, they've turned rabidly anti-Israel, and it's sad to see. I mean, when you look at these college campuses, you look at these big cities, we can have differences on politics and geopolitics, but when the blood wasn't even dried off these Israeli civilians, you had people out cheering on Hamas and the butchery, and it's just a real sickness in our society.
Let me ask you a question. I've never asked you this. Consider you a good friend, and your wife, good friend of the family as well. You're not Jewish. even when you were in the House of Representatives, you really led the fight to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. You see that part of the world, and Israel in particular, as crucially important. You speak out immediately when events like this take place, and you don't hesitate, you're not ambiguous. You also make it clear that you don't want Palestinians from Gaza or other areas of the world where they are trained and brainwashed in a culture of anti-Americanism, by the way, and anti-Semitism. Where do you think your concern or your belief or really your love of the Jewish people comes from?
Well, look, part of it is I had experience serving in the Middle East as an active duty naval officer in Iraq and places like Fallujah and Ramadi, and so I got a taste of the culture of that region. Remember, there were elites in the United States saying, well, if you just topple the dictator, they want democracy and all this stuff. Well, it turns out they didn't necessarily aspire to an American-style democracy. They viewed freedom as the imposition of Islamic law, Sharia law. So it was a different culture. And so I was like, okay, in this whole region, you've got this one little outpost that truly believes in freedom, the State of Israel. And they're the only one we can really count on in that entire region. And we have great economic ties. We have a lot of cultural affinity back and forth. Then it's also the case that Israel is unique because that is the birthplace of Western civilization. I mean, the Judeo-Christian values that have animated Western civilization and our country were birthed there. And so it's not just a random country on a map. It's a place that has enormous historic significance. And I know you've been there, Mark, and if any of your listeners have been there, they'll know what I'm saying. If people haven't, when things settle down, it's something that you want to do. You can take out a Bible, and you can go where David fought Goliath. You can go and look to see where Jesus walked. All that stuff, it's all right there for you. And it's a really, really moving experience when you're able to do it. So I think that there's a lot of factors as to why we have such a strong relationship. And look, they have a very tough neighborhood, and they're standing for the right things. And the least we can do is give them support.
I think Biden and Blinken are saying one thing publicly, and some of that isn't even good. And then privately, they're really sticking it to the Israelis. They really are. 7.5-hour discussions going on behind the scenes last night, where apparently they have written documents on what Israel can and cannot do and so forth. Who the hell runs a war this way? And who the hell imposes their will on another country this way?
It's absurd. I mean, I can tell you as president, we will support Israel's right to defend themselves, and that means defend yourself to the hilt. When you have a massacre of this scale, and Mark, if this were the equivalent of the United States with our population, because Israel is a very small country, this would be the equivalent of like 60,000 Americans being killed in a terrorist attack. I mean, I remember how I felt on 9/11 when we had 3,000. It was like the earth totally was shattered. Imagine if there was a terrorist attack that killed 60,000. That's what they're dealing with. You can't just say you're going to do a couple glancing blows at Hamas and then let this happen again. You need to totally eliminate Hamas. So, look, the people like Blinken, all these people left, I don't see them calling for Hamas to release the hostages. I don't see them calling for Hamas to unconditionally surrender. It's all about what Israel can't do. So when I'm president, we're going to let them defend themselves. We're going to support them, and we'll be willing to push back against the United Nations, fake media, all this stuff that always ends up arrayed against this tiny little democratic country in the Middle East.
If people want to help you, Governor, where do they go?
Website is rondesantis.com, rondesantis.com. You can also text FREEDOM to 512345. We'd love to have your support. I think that we've been doing an awful lot, particularly in the early states. Our country is unraveling in many different ways, and we need strong, focused, disciplined leadership to be able to right the ship, and I'll get the job done for you.
By the way, I see where Chris Christie's groups are trying to get Democrats to come to the Republican side so they can vote for him in the Republican primary. Something about that guy, Governor, I just can't stomach him, but that's my problem. I want to thank you, Governor DeSantis, for all you're doing for the American people. God bless you, my friend.
God bless, Mark. Take care.
You too.